Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into something that's been all over the news lately. New York City's congestion pricing. It finally went live just a few weeks ago, and there's a lot to unpack. So we're going to be looking at this awesome Wendover Productions video. They break down the history, the logic, the potential impacts, you name it. The thing that really struck me was how this goes way beyond just drivers complaining about traffic, you know?
Oh yeah, for sure. It gets at how we design and manage cities on a really fundamental level.
Okay, so let's start with just how bad the problem is. Lower Manhattan, we all know it's crowded, but the video puts it into perspective. Did you know that it's denser than almost any other city in the US?
It's pretty mind-blowing. We're talking about 2 million people during the day, crammed into a space smaller than Disney World. That's a density level up there with Kolkata and Kathmandu.
Whoa, that puts it into perspective for sure. And it's not just about the numbers. The video talks about how this density affects everything. Infrastructure, emergency services, just everyday quality of life, I mean.
Right. Exactly. Imagine an ambulance trying to get through those streets during rush hour. It's a nightmare. And the video actually cites a study. Increased traffic congestion is directly linked to longer EMS response times. And we all know what that means.
Yeah, it's a life or death situation, literally.
Absolutely. And it underscores that this isn't just about, individual convenience. It's about the health of the city as a whole, how well it functions.
So this traffic thing, it's not a new problem, right? New York's been trying to deal with it for decades,
Oh,
right?
yeah. Definitely not new at all. The video takes us through this whole history of attempts to fix it, going all the way back to the 1930s. Mayor after mayor, they've all tried to find a solution, but nothing seemed to really stick.
And that brings us to congestion pricing. At first glance, it seems pretty simple. You charge a fee to enter Manhattan during peak hours, but obviously there's a lot more to it.
Right. It's been incredibly controversial. People have really strong feelings about it on both sides.
Yeah. Back in 2007, when Mayor Bloomberg proposed it, there was a ton of pushback. People were worried about certain boroughs paying more than others, working class commuters getting hit harder. And then there was the whole New Jersey loophole.
Right, the loophole. So the concern there was that people driving in from New Jersey, they often use bridges and tunnels that are free to get into the city. So they wouldn't have to pay this congestion charge. It would create this kind of uneven playing field, you see. It was a major sticking point back then.
So all that opposition basically killed the plan in 2008, but then it came back in 2017. This time it was because the MTA was having all these financial problems.
Yeah, exactly. The subway system was falling apart, basically. So it added this whole new layer of urgency. This time, the plan had Governor Cuomo on board, and it actually started moving forward.
But it wasn't smooth sailing, right? There were delays, lawsuits, then the pandemic hit, and then Governor Hochul put the brakes on it right before it was supposed to launch. Like every step forward, it was 2 steps back.
It really was. There was opposition from all sorts of groups. And they had valid concerns, to be fair, about how would it all play out.
So even with all that, here we are in 2025 with congestion pricing actually happening. The big question everyone's asking is, will it actually work? But before we get into that, I'm curious about the logic behind it. The video makes a compelling argument that congestion pricing is actually a really smart solution from an economic standpoint.
It makes a lot of sense when you think about it.
Yeah.
Because what it's really doing is recognizing that time is valuable, but that value is different for different people at different times, right? Think about opportunity cost, Every minute you're stuck in traffic is a minute you could be spending on something else that matters to you.
Right. So it's not about punishing people for driving. It's more about recognizing that some people need those clear roads more than others at any given time. The video gives this great example. Let's say there's someone just casually driving around on a Sunday afternoon versus someone who is super late for a really important meeting. Their sense of how valuable that time is right now is totally different.
Yeah, totally. And congestion pricing actually lets people express that individual value in how they choose to get around.
So if your time is really valuable to you right then, you'll pay a premium to get where you need to go quickly.
Precisely. But if you're not in a rush, you might choose a cheaper option, like public transportation, which ideally would become more attractive and efficient with the money generated from the congestion charge.
That makes a lot of sense. And it's not just about cars either. The video also talks about buses, delivery trucks, and most importantly, emergency vehicles.
Oh yeah. If there are fewer cars clogging up the roads, it helps everyone. Whether they're driving or not, it all comes back to those slower ambulance times we talked about. The faster they can get through, the more lives they can save.
Okay, so we've talked about the crazy density problem, all the ways they tried to fix it in the past, and the whole economic argument behind congestion pricing. But the video goes even deeper, right? Into the science of how traffic works. And this is where it gets a bit mind-bending. Apparently, you can actually analyze traffic through the lens of fluid dynamics.
It's so cool how these seemingly totally unrelated fields can connect. So the video explains that adding just one more car doesn't always have the same impact. Sometimes it's nothing, but then at a certain point it can create this chain reaction and everything slows down.
They use the example of a highway, right? Showing how the flow of cars, the throughput, changes depending on the speed.
Exactly. And there's this tipping point, see? Like, imagine pouring water into a funnel. If you pour slowly, it goes through fine. But if you pour too fast, it starts backing up and the funnel becomes less efficient. It's the same with roads. At a certain level of congestion, they actually become less efficient, not more.
So the goal of congestion pricing isn't to eliminate cars altogether. It's about getting the number of vehicles below that tipping point, so the flow works better for everyone.
Yeah, it's about finding that sweet spot where the system runs most smoothly.
Which leads us back to the big question, will this actually work in New York?
Well, the gantries are up, those things on the highways, and the technology is in place to track cars coming into the zone. But as we said, it's been a bumpy road getting to this point. Lots of politics, lots of skepticism.
So even though the technology might be ready, there are a lot of unknowns, right? To get a better idea of what might happen, the video looks at two cities that already have congestion pricing, Stockholm and London.
They're really interesting case studies, both trying to solve the same problem, but they took very different paths. What worked in one place didn't necessarily work in the other. Looking at their experiences could give us some clues about what to expect in New York.
Okay, so let's dive into those case studies next. I'm really curious to hear how it all played out in those cities.
Yeah, let's take a closer look. I think you'll find their stories pretty fascinating, both encouraging and cautionary, in a way. So Stockholm and London, two cities that decided to give congestion pricing a shot. What's interesting is that they had totally different experiences, even though they were trying to achieve the same thing.
Right, let's start with Stockholm. They actually implemented it way back in the early 2000s. What made them decide to go for it in the first place?
Well, it was a combination of things, really. They had terrible traffic, obviously. But they also wanted to clean up the air and raise money to improve their infrastructure. So they did a trial run, and the results were so good, they just made it permanent.
Wait, so you're saying people actually liked paying to drive into the city? That doesn't seem very likely.
I know, right? But the thing is, they saw the benefits pretty quickly. Traffic got better, commutes were faster and smoother, and the city center became much more pleasant. For everyone, not just drivers. Once people actually experienced the improvements, public opinion shifted.
So Stockholm's congestion pricing was a pretty quick success. What about London? Didn't they have a much harder time getting people on board?
Yeah, definitely. There was a lot more resistance in London at first. The rollout was a bit rough, and it took longer for the benefits to become clear.
That makes sense. London is massive with a super complicated transportation system. It's not like you can just wave a magic wand and fix everything.
Exactly. But here's the interesting part. Even though there was all that initial pushback, Londoners eventually came around to the idea. And one of the biggest reasons for that, in both cities, was how they used the revenue.
Right, the video talked about that. It seems like putting that money back into public transportation is a key part of making it work.
Totally. It creates this positive feedback loop. When you invest in buses, trains, and other forms of mass transit, they become more appealing, which then reduces the number of people who need to drive.
So it's not just about making driving less attractive, it's also about making the alternatives better, improving the whole system.
Exactly. A healthy city needs a transportation system that's balanced, not just focused on cars.
Now, even with all these success stories, there are still some legitimate concerns about congestion pricing, right? We talked about some of them before. Like, is it fair to everyone? How do you actually enforce it?
Right. You can't just ignore those issues. For example, what about people who live in low-income neighborhoods? They might rely on cars more and might not have access to good public transportation options. Could this end up hurting them more?
So how do you deal with that? How do you make sure it doesn't become a system that just benefits the wealthy?
It takes some careful planning and effort. Some cities have tried things like giving discounts or subsidies to low-income commuters, or they've put more money into public transit in areas that are underserved.
Makes sense. It's about making sure the system works for everyone, not just a select few. But what about enforcement? How do you actually stop people from just dodging the fee?
Well, both Stockholm and London rely heavily on technology. They use cameras and electronic tolling systems to track cars coming into the congestion zones. It's pretty hard to cheat.
So the technology's there, but what if someone just refuses to pay?
There are fines, of course.
Mm.
But more importantly, it's designed to be really inconvenient to avoid the charges. Most people just decide it's not worth the hassle or the risk.
Okay, so it sounds like congestion pricing, while not perfect, could really make a difference. But the question is New York really ready for this? I mean, look at how difficult it's been just to get it started.
Yeah, it's a good question. And like any big change in a city, there are going to be some bumps in the road. The key is to keep track of what's happening, collect data, and make adjustments as needed.
It's like a giant experiment, and we're all part of it. It's going to be really interesting to see how it all plays out. But even with all the challenges and uncertainty, this could be a turning point for New York.
I agree. It has the potential to change how we think about the city, not just how we get around, how we balance individual needs with the good of everyone.
It's a reminder that the decisions we make today shape the cities of the future. Speaking of the future, what do you think the ripple effects of this experiment might be? If New York makes it work, could this become a model for other cities dealing with similar problems?
It's definitely possible. If it works in a city as big and influential as New York, other cities might be more willing to try it too. But even beyond specific policies, what's really exciting is the potential for a shift in how we think about cities altogether.
So you're talking about cities designed for people, not just cars.
Exactly. Imagine cities where walking, biking, and taking public transportation aren't just backups. They're the best way to get around. Cleaner air, safer streets, public spaces that are vibrant and accessible.
That's a pretty amazing vision. And even though it's early days, it's hard not to feel a little bit hopeful. But it's important to be realistic too. There will be challenges along the way.
Oh, for sure. This isn't a quick fix. It's going to take a long-term commitment. Being willing to adapt, to learn from what works and what doesn't.
It's a journey, not just a destination, right? And as we figure this out, it's so important to keep having these conversations, exploring the different perspectives, making sure we're creating a future that works for everyone.
Absolutely. And I think it's also important to remember that the success of this whole thing really depends on us, the people who live here.
What do you mean?
The choices we make, our willingness to try new things, to adapt to a different way of getting around. Those are the things that will ultimately decide whether congestion pricing succeeds in the long run.
So it's not just about the policy itself, it's about a change in how we think and act.
Exactly. And that's why it's crucial to keep talking about this, to engage with these ideas, to understand the trade-offs, and to work together to create the city we want to live in.
Okay, I think we've covered a lot of ground here. We've gone from the specifics of how congestion pricing actually works to the bigger picture of what it means for cities. It's definitely a complex issue with no easy solutions.
Absolutely. And as New York tries this out, the whole world is watching. What happens here, good or bad, will have an impact far beyond just Manhattan.
It's pretty amazing to be seeing this happen in real time. It's a massive experiment, not just in transportation, but in our values, our vision for the future.
And regardless of how you feel about congestion pricing, I think it sparked an important conversation about the challenges facing our cities and what we can do about them.
For sure, and that conversation needs to keep going. We have to ask the hard questions, challenge assumptions, and find new solutions if we want to thrive in the 21st century.
Well said. The future of our cities depends on it.
So as we wrap up this look at NYC's congestion pricing, we want to encourage you to keep thinking about these issues, keep the conversation going, help shape the future of our cities.
Because in the end, the choices we make today will determine what kind of world we leave behind, for ourselves and for everyone who comes after us.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll be back soon with another one.
It's saying that, well, different people value their time differently, and that should be reflected in how we use public resources, like roads.
Oh, I see. So it's like instead of roads just being this free-for-all, congestion pricing kind of puts a price tag on that space and time. Like, how much is it worth to you to use this road right now?
Exactly. And it's not just individual drivers either. Think about businesses, delivery services, ambulances. They all need to get around quickly. And congestion pricing, in theory, allows for that. It factors that in.
That's really interesting. It's like it forces us to think about who gets to use these public spaces in a crowded city. And maybe a one-size-fits-all approach isn't always fair or the best way to do things.
Yeah, it's deep. Congestion pricing makes us think about all these big questions. How do we value time, space, resources, all that? And those questions go way beyond traffic. It's about social equity, economic development, the whole idea of what makes a city livable.
So this thing about charging a fee to drive into Manhattan, it's not just about cars. It brings up all sorts of philosophical, even ethical questions.
Right. And I think that's why it's been so controversial. It's not just about keeping the traffic flowing. It's about challenging how we think cities should work and who gets access to what.
This has been such a thought-provoking conversation. We've gone from the nitty-gritty of how traffic works to these big picture ideas about the future of cities. It's obvious there are no easy answers here.
Definitely not. And with New York going ahead with this experiment, the whole world's watching. The results, whether they're good or bad, they're going to have a ripple effect way beyond New York.
It's kind of exciting to be watching it unfold, you know? It's like this huge social experiment, and we're all part of it. It's testing our transportation systems, but also our values, how we see the future of cities.
And no matter how you feel about congestion pricing, I think it's made us talk about these really important challenges that cities face and what we can do about them.
For sure. And that conversation has to keep going. We've got to ask the hard questions, be willing to try new things, find creative solutions if we want to make cities work in the 21st century.
Absolutely. The future of our cities really does depend on it.
Well, we've reached the end of our deep dive into New York City's congestion pricing. We hope this has gotten you thinking about these issues, keep the conversation going, and help us shape the future of our cities.
It's the choices we make today that'll determine what kind of world we leave behind, for ourselves and for future generations.
Thanks for joining us on this journey, everyone. We'll catch you next time for another deep dive.